Welcome back, everyone, to Massive Month. And this is the massive episode that I'm sure most listeners have been waiting for. This is the episode where we talk to the man, the myth, the godfather of the massive verse. But first, have to introduce myself. I am Josh Scar, host of Talking Smack, and I'm joined this week by our walking massive verse Wikipedia, Marty. Marty, welcome back.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate you having me. And I don't know if walking Wikipedia is anywhere close to. Don't give me that high praise. We got Kyle on the phone. I just like to read his comics.
Well, as I said, you are our Wikipedia. Kyle is not as readily available to us as you are, but the man is here. Kyle Higgins, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for making the time. It's been a while since you've been on this one. Last time we spoke was for Supermassive 2022. So again, I'm just really grateful for you to be here, and can't wait to dive into massive verse conversation and maybe some nerd stuff. Because the first question we always have is our icebreaker, which is, what you doing? What are the things you're doing to keep the stress away, or when the stress is down and you have time to kill? What are the things you're doing?
What am I doing? uh, that's a complicated question. I, there's things are very, very, very busy right now. So I feel a little bit like a broken record because I feel like I always say that, but in particular right now they are certainly there's a lot going on. So I've actually found I've had all these knee surgeries over the last few years, and unfortunately, I haven't been able to move very well in a long time. And the physical therapy is pretty brutal, and um, I haven't been able to run in years. Walking more than half a block is really hard. All that to say, I think, knock on wood, I might have started to turn a corner a bit. And if my leg was about 60% before, it's about 75% now. So it's definitely we're definitely making gains here. Finally, my quad wouldn't turn on for a long time. And so trying to walk or do anything just sends all of the force straight to the joint. And it's pretty brutal, if I'm being honest. Uh, but now that I'm able to move a bit better, like I'm back in the gym, like I've been doing on top of physical therapy, like I've been doing like 2-a-day sessions in the gym just to kind of manage the stress. So like crazy early in the morning and then later in the day sometimes. And so I'm feeling better than I felt in a very long time, which is really nice. But like today, I'm I wasn't able to go to the gym because I am so physically exhausted. But that doesn't, like, then the stress comes and it's like I really really want to go to the gym, but I can't actually drag myself there because I'm so beat up from going to the gym so much. So um, that said, I mean, work life balance is kind of a great idea, and I do try to be mindful of that to some extent, but ultimately, my work very much is my life, and it's something I'm very passionate about, and so I tend to work kind of 24/7. Like even as we were starting to record this, like if you hear my keyboard, it's because I'm messaging with Eduardo Ferragato right now. We're trying to figure out a design for the Catalyst War for some stuff coming up for issue 27. And it's just like, it's all the time. Like, that's just what we do. So we're in the midst of the Infernal Girl Red Kickstarter right now. And in the final days, we have 7 days left. And we're constantly, rolling out new things with that, and press pieces and interviews just to raise more general awareness about things. Not only the comic book, but there is the audio series that we do for every issue. And so I'm going through cuts for each episode on that because I direct that as well. Um, and then we have a bunch of projects that, I mean, certainly there's Rogue Sun and Dead Lucky, but we also have a host of projects that people don't know about yet. We'll be announcing some stuff at New York Comic Con this year that should be pretty fun. And there's a bunch of stuff for next year. We're not announcing anything for this year. Like, everything that you don't know about is for next year, and that stuff is going to be like, it's stuff I'm really, really excited about. So it'll be after Catalyst War, um, and maybe then I'll be able to breathe. That's the hope.
So sometime in 2024, you'll be able to sleep as well.
Well, you know what? I will say that is something I actually don't mess around with. Like, I pulled too many all nighters in my 20s when I was writing for DC, and it's not worth it, and it's diminishing returns, and it just wrecks you. Now it's even harder for me to do something like that. So I've always am getting 5 to 8 hours of sleep a night, despite I get up at 5 a.m., but I don't, or earlier sometimes. But like I don't mess around with that, because if like yeah, that's the thing, is like it's just, you can't function otherwise. And then if you're in comics and you're working on a lot of things, you're always kind of running the risk or fighting off fatigue and the threat of burnout. And I learned that a long time ago. So it's something that you really do have to be mindful of, and take efforts to take care of yourself. So everything from diet to exercise to, there's a thing in California. There's a company called Stretch Lab. I don't know if that's nationwide or not, but I think it's nationwide. But I started going to the Stretch Lab place as well, just to like, because as a writer, we're not doing video on this recording, but as a writer, I'm shrugging my shoulders up to my ears right now. Like, that's kind of like your default mode, and it's just like you have to be mindful of that, and you really have to take care of yourself, because you're not going to get those years back. But also, if 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 you let yourself break down, then it doesn't matter how great your ideas are, or how much drive you have to tell stories. If you actually can't do it, then it's kind of all for naught.
Yeah, very well said.
I can totally relate to the whole stretching thing as you get older. So, Kyle, I'm the same age as you, and
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of activities that I do, and I blew my knee out. So, I feel your pain on a lot of that. I dislocated my knee and tore my MCL and retinaculum playing
Oh
soccer.
man,
Yeah, it was brutal. And to bring back to, where you're at, I mean, I still, my knee gets locked up every now and again. And
I'm
I feel
sorry.
you.
That's awful.
Yeah, it's the worst. It's the absolute worst. But,
Yeah,
stretching
I
is
did.
huge.
I tore my ACL getting on stage at Power Morphicon in 2018 for the live table read that we did, the Shattered Grid Live. I'd injured my knee playing basketball. I had two incidents before that, so their doctors aren't actually sure where I fully tore it. But the final incident was, I was getting on stage at Power Morphicon and it popped, and I fell in front of like 1,000 people, and two actors, Power Ranger actors, caught me, and I still ran the table read afterwards, but I knew like this is really bad, like under the table, like this is a bad situation. And it turned out I tore my ACL and meniscus, had that surgery, did the long rehab, 12-month recovery on that. It didn't go well. So I ended up re-tearing my meniscus. So then had another surgery for that. And that's where the real problem started. And it took a while for them to figure out, but essentially I started, not only did I tear the meniscus again, and they had to take out about 40% of it, but in that surgery, they discovered that the reason my knee was continuing to lock out, as you're talking about, is because from something, from one of the injuries, cartilage was flaking off my bone, off my tibia. And so I had loose cartilage floating in my knee for over a year, and unfortunately, it was degenerative, so it was going to keep getting worse, and so it was like spreading. It was like sandpaper inside, and so this hole in my cartilage kept spreading. And at this time, I was slated to go direct my first feature finally, with a very real budget and a very real movie star, and they said what you really need is a cartilage transplant, a Macy transplant. But if we do, and we'll do a transplant for the meniscus because it's very rare to do. But the surgeon that I had he's the shit. Like he's in LA. He does the Rams and the Dodgers. Like he's the guy. And he's like, it just so happens that I do a lot of these. And he said, but if we do this, like, you won't be walking in time to direct the movie. And so I delayed the surgery, and then the movie got delayed, and then the movie got delayed again. And I said, I gotta have, I gotta get this done. And fortunately, I did it when I did it, which was March of 2022, because when they went inside, it turned out that it was my cartilage was gone. And if I waited any longer, I would have needed, and I might still need one day, a total knee replacement. And so the Macy transplant is it's the it's the hardest thing I've ever gone through, because it was 10 weeks where I was not allowed to put any weight on it at all. And you're locked out in a brace for most of that, and then physical therapy 3 times a week. At that time, like, I live alone with a cat, and so I was entirely on my own, and I wasn't talking to anyone, and I was just bunkered down working because it was the only thing I could do to get through it. It was awful, and that's when we made the verses, the Radiant Black versus Blaze short. Like, I did all of that during that. Um, and so after that one, though, the, that's where, like, yeah, it just, I had a lot of trouble where the knee, the quad, like the muscles weren't reactivating, and it's just been a long road. Anyway, this is way more information than anyone wants to know about about knees and my life. So let's talk some
well,
superheroes.
well, before we go into that, I mean, there's a very important question of like mental health. What have you learned about like maintaining your mental health through something like this? I feel like that is a pertinent discussion and an omnipresent discussion.
Um, I unfortunately don't have great a great answer there, because it's something I struggle with a lot, and especially after the surgery, I've struggled with depression my whole life, and I come from a neurodivergent family, and I have my own things as well. And um, after that surgery, I very much put myself in a place where it was like, I just have to get through this. But um, the depression was very, very bad, and they tried to get me to talk to someone, and I didn't, and I should have. Um, and it's only recently that I've that things are better, really, to if I'm being totally frank. And I was finding different ways to cope. um, and some of them were very good, and some of them weren't. um, and it's I have a really amazing family and a really amazing group of friends and collaborators and creators that I work with, that all care about me a lot. And I know not everyone has that, so I feel very fortunate for that. And, like, literally the conversation I was just having with Eduardo before we jumped on was about, like, you know, are you doing okay? Like, I know you're stretched really thin. Like, are you sure you're not on too many things? And conversation like that. And I understand that, and I would say the same thing to any of my friends that I see doing a ton of things as well. And um, I think it's hard as any it's hard for anyone to admit when they need help, of course, but I think it's even harder to actually admitting that is one thing, but then actually doing something about it is another.
Hmm.
And um, I don't know. I don't know. I don't really have any great insight on it, unfortunately, other than just it's something that, you know, the more you talk about things that are going on and how you're feeling and what's going on, the more it kind of takes the power out of it and the fear out of it.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and there's something to be said there. But I think whether you're talking about being a creator or just a human being, um, we are all in this together in one way, shape, or another. And I think that the more that you can find your people, um, and you can do things with them, and support them, and they can support you, I think it's good not only for your art but also for your growth as a person.
Yeah,
That
beautifully said. And I appreciate you opening up about that because, like I said, mental health is important no matter where you are. I've been in a little bit of a bad place the last couple months, but among other things, the podcast Discord and other things like that, creators such as yourself just writing stories that allow me to, for lack of a better word, dissociate for 20, 30 minutes at a time and just give me a little stress relief.
Yeah,
It
of
goes a
course.
long way.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be kind to yourself. I find it's a fine line for me because I very much, I very much tie my self worth to my productivity in an obviously super healthy way. Um, but again, it's a fine line because it's really hard to achieve anything meaningful and worthwhile without actually putting in a lot of work. That's just the truth. And where that line is and what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're willing to do, it's different for every person. And what you're able to manage, that's the other part. It's like you have to really be honest with yourself about things like that. I heard there's a writer I love. He's a screenwriter, John August. He and Craig Mazin have the incredible podcast Script Notes, and for years, John has said on the podcast, like, at a certain point I stopped saying I have bad habits and I started saying I have habits. And just that slight reframing, as a writer, he's talking about, it's like it speaks to a level of self-acceptance about what you are and who you are, and as a creator, and what you do. And you can only beat yourself up so much about things. And yeah, the, I don't know. Sorry, I lost the thread there. I don't know where.
A couple of things that you hit on that I want to touch upon. But first of all, like, I have a great deal of respect for you on a couple of levels. Like, I the first time I got into comics 4 years ago now, so super late in the game. I'm the same age as you. Like, I tried to get into them early on, and I heard your interview on the Invincible podcast because the first comic I got into was Invincible, and then I found the Invincible podcast, and then I found you, and then basically the rest is history. Like, I've literally gone through a lot of your back catalog of Nightwing and of the stuff that you did with Batman. I haven't touched Ultraman yet, but, like, got into Radiant Black and the Discord and helping those guys set that up, and
Oh, are
and
you in the Discord?
having you be yeah, I'm one of the moderators. I was the one that set up the chat bot that converted regular text into radiant text, but now isn't working anymore because the hosting fees just went up the roof, and I was like, I'm not paying for this. So that's why it doesn't
Oh,
do it
wow.
anymore. Yeah.
I did well.
So
It's nice to speak with you. I didn't put that together.
yeah,
What are the
no
hosting
worries.
fees? I see. I don't. I'm such a. It's weird. I'm such a luddite. Except I was so tech savvy for so long, and now I'm like, what the? I don't even know what a Discord is. Like, what? So
Yeah,
you have to
I
pay.
gotta.
You have to pay hosting fees for the Discord.
Well, so I custom wrote the bot in Python. So my day job, I lead a data engineering team for a major company, and
Oh,
I was like, I'm
cool.
gonna do this on the side. Yeah, so I just kind of created the bot, and I worked with Nick Ranger, who ended up, like, decoding the font file, even though, like, Michael
You
was
guys
like,
could
you
have.
could have just
Yeah,
asked
Michael
me.
had.
Yeah, that's
It's a
it.
Michael
Yeah,
has
he
it.
said the
We
same.
have it. He built a TTF file of it. Like
Yeah,
we
the TIFF
have.
file. Yeah, yep,
No, no,
that's
it's not a
exactly
TIFF
what.
file. It's a True Type. He has a True Type font.
Oh, even better. But yeah, so
Yeah.
anyways, Nick built the TIFF file out of it, and then I took it and I wrote Python and, wrote a Discord bot, and then I, put it on a server. I really have to. There is a free version, but I have to convert a bunch of stuff. I just haven't had time. Been super busy, like I know you know. But anyways, kind of back to where I was going. Like, I like love you as a writer, and this is kind of, I would say, a dream interview for me. My daughter got into comics. She's, like, absolutely infatuated with Inferno Girl Red and all that stuff, which has
Oh, that's
been
great.
awesome. She got a chance to say hi to Matt Groom, so that was, like, her big thing. But, like, one of the things that I really want, like, that even, like, I respect even more, is that you talk about a sense of mentorship with your creators, and bringing creators that, like, Eduardo, who really wasn't very well known, Marcelo, and others, and you kind of, like, build them up, and that's something that, like, I firmly believe in as a leader of an organization, and I just want, like, I think that's amazing that you do that and you surround yourself with people like that. But can you talk to us about, like, how that process came about of you, like, developing that mentorship? Because I feel like that's a skill that's almost it's a soft skill that's lost in a lot of ways. And I know we talk about mental health a little bit in the beginning of this, which kind of correlates to having that support system and mentorship. But can you talk to us a little bit about how that related through your comic journey?
Sure. I mean, it's funny because I don't I don't really look at it as mentorship in that way. I guess with some creators or some people, it really depends on um, it really kind of depends on like who the creator is and where they're at in their career, like where they're coming in on things. You know, it's like Ryan Parrott does not need anything from me. You know, like Ryan Parrott does not like Ryan and I have been, you know, best friends since college. So we came up together and we helped each other. And you know, someone like Ryan and someone like Scott Snyder were very influential to me in that way for very different ways. When I started um, at DC, you know, I think I think there. Look, I was on the phone with my dad today, and I was talking about something unrelated to this, but I think what I said applies, which is that modeled behavior, especially when you're starting out, is incredibly important. And watching the way that Scott mentored over the years so many creators, and even though I didn't start as I wasn't a student of his or anything like that. Like he and I both came into DC on our own, but I was 9 years younger than him and still am. Uh, as he was getting on bigger things, and he was a much more fully formed writer than I was. So it's inevitable that you look up to anyone that is willing to help, and also who you respect and who is doing the things that you want to be doing. And so watching how he handled himself, and he came from a teaching background as well, and then certainly James Tynan and Marguerite Bennett, and then some others over the years in an official capacity when he was like teaching programs at DC. Like that is a very that very much is kind of a mentorship pipeline. And so that was something that I saw and appreciated and respected. But then on my own, you know, I was trying to figure out how to not only write consistently, but like do it at a high level on kind of like a tightrope act where everything you're writing is coming out. It's a champagne problem to have, but there's a lot of pressure there. When they give you the keys to your favorite character, it's the dream job until you realize that like, you know, they've also cut the brakes on the car, you know? So like, what are you like? Okay.
Yeah.
um, Ryan was such a huge help to me. Um, and at the time I remember, you know, Ryan was JJ Abrams' assistant. And I remember when I was doing Nightwing, it was such a complicated time. I look back on it now. It was such a complicated time to try to write comic books at DC, much less to start your career as a writer. And the pressure was so immense. Um, and there were times where I was like, I owe an issue tomorrow. I owe a script tomorrow. I don't know what to do. And so there was one issue in particular on Nightwing where I had the beginnings of an idea, and Ryan was like, he's like, come to the Bad Robot offices. He's like, I can take lunch at 1 p.m. We'll figure it out. And so I went over, and he got on his lunch break after dealing with high stress stuff for JJ. And it was like, we went and sat in the courtyard, and like Ryan helped me break an issue of Nightwing, like on the spot, you know? And there's a reason why I set up Black Market Narrative and I call it a creative collective, because it is. And you can ask any of the guys that have known me a long time. Like I have, for whatever reason, I love helping people I believe in, and especially my friends. And so, you know, Mike Martz, who is the Batman Group editor, used to joke around that I was going to introduce my way out of a job one day, because I got my foot
It's
in the
crazy.
door at DC very early, and I was constantly going like, you need to meet my friend Ryan, you need to meet Alex Siegel, you need to meet, and I was introducing writers I believed in. Um, and that's just very fulfilling to me. Um, and then behind the scenes over the years, I've always helped with projects that I liked or friends stuff, whether it's walking things to image and trying to help facilitate getting books going for them there. Uh, like Stray Dogs, like I actually walked that book to image. I walked that to Eric Stevenson. Um,
Wow.
there have been different books over the years. I think I made the introduction for James Tynan for what became Department of Truth to Eric. Marguerite, I walked something in that I don't know if it ever ended up coming out or not, but there've been a lot of things over the years. It's just something. It's probably coming from a filmmaking background, which is a very collaborative field as well, if you do it right, in my opinion. Um, so there's some of that, but the other part of it too is that, like, when I said before, like John August talks about, at a certain point you stop saying you have bad habits and you start saying you have habits, hopefully with some maturity. Well, when I really look at what I do well and where my weaknesses are, you know, I could very much make the argument that I am not a writer. I'm a director who writes. And the idea of being a solo voice individual, I can do it. I've made a career doing that. But I love co-writing and I love breaking story with people. And so the real game changer for me was meeting Matt and Michael when I was starting on Power Rangers, and they were doing the Ranger Danger podcast. And then we started doing episodes covering the comics, because I'd always had this kind of like dream idea of, like, I came up in the era of like DVD director's commentaries, and so just the idea of like, hey, why don't we do one of those like for every issue, like once a month? And so we talked once a month going through the issues, and then we started talking, you know, over G chat, and then we started talking every single day. And they're in Australia and I'm in LA, and I just really loved these guys and realized how talented they were. And it just kind of took off from there, in terms of building something that just continued to allow us to work together, and be friends. And I uh, Mark Guggenheim told me once that Mark's a friend of mine, and he had a theory that writers set up their companies, when they set up companies, to accentuate the things that they want to do and kind of diminish the things they don't want to do. So like certain writers, I won't name names necessarily, but like certain writers' companies, when you realize like, oh wait, that company, wait, it's run by a writer, you wouldn't think that, because it's way more run like a big production company, where that person who is the head figure, it's like they don't really write anymore. Versus like I remember like early on in my career, I directed, when I was in college, I directed this big superhero noir short film that kind of like really jump started my career. And so I was going up for like really big movies when I was like 23 years old, and I was like doing what they call the water bottle tour, like going around town, like taking all these meetings. And I remember I was so excited to meet Steve Zalian's company, because I love Steve Zalian. He wrote um, um, Schindler's List, and I mean, just he's one of our greatest writers. And I remember getting to the offices, and it was like a guy in a broom closet, is what it felt like. It was like a development exec form. And I was like, oh, is this the place? He's like, oh yeah, Steve doesn't, like, he's at home writing. Like he doesn't, he's got a company, but like he's a writer first and foremost, sort of thing. And
That's
so,
crazy.
so setting up something like Black Market Narrative in this way, it is funny how I think about Mark's comment all the time, because it's like, as much as I am a writer, like I'm doing quite a bit more creative directing now. And that's something that is definitely incredibly fulfilling for me. And it's probably a little bit more in the ballpark of like what I really love doing, because my first love is directing still. And so it's not to say I don't like comics or anything like that. I love comics, but being able to kind of carve a slightly different path here is something that has been incredibly rewarding and fulfilling, because it allows me to explore a lot of different avenues of storytelling and different skill sets and interests that I've had for my whole life and for really my whole career. But I would argue that maybe up until recently, like the last 2 or 3 years, a lot of people probably didn't know that I do these things. Like a lot of people probably didn't know that I was a sound editor for 10 years before I was writing comics, and that I worked in post production since I was 16 years old. And so, I started by animating comic book trailers. I was in high school. So the idea of doing a No One audio series is kind of a no brainer to me. Um, but I could understand how it might seem like it's out of left field for a lot of people, or to a lot of people. But that's actually kind of cool to me. Like I like that we all kind of come from these different backgrounds with these different skill sets, and we're all in this together. And so we're just making cool stuff that way.
The no one, the whole concept of no one and the podcast, and you know, in combination with the book is just so immersive. And not only that, but like the website and the fake website that you guys put up to try to get us to do passwords, and all of a sudden we couldn't get into it, and everyone was going nuts on Discord and Twitter and everywhere, and we're like, we need to hack, like we were trying to hack it at one point with some stuff, and Michael was like, you're not going to be able to do it, and like just the community, and like on the creative side with you guys kind of being involved with us along for the journey, even though you guys are like 1,000 steps ahead of us. It's just such an awesome experience, and I think it makes everything so much better. But like the No One podcast, along with the book, is unreal. Like, first of
Mhm.
all, I can't read that book right before bed because my mind, like, I can't focus on it. There's so many characters, and I really appreciate you guys putting like the characters at the end with the names, like so we can revisit and rethink about like who's on our own big boards. But like I have to dedicate time to sit down and read that, because my mind's going like, oh, maybe it's this guy. No, maybe it's this guy. No, maybe it's this guy. And then you listen to the
Who
podcast.
do
It's
you
like,
have
oh
someone
crap,
now? Who's your current theory?
it changes. Oh my god! So I just finished issue 5, literally. Right, I reread 3, 4, and 5 because I
Mhm.
was I was behind right before I got on here, and I thought it was a football player guy, like at the end of 4, and
Right.
then like at the end of 5, they're talking about like how, oh well, maybe the guy's not dead, and I was like, well, that's a no brainer because that makes sense. So like, I I don't know. I still I gotta take some time and like digest what I just read tonight and kind of really think about it. But like the misdirects, if they are or not or are, I mean, I could even see it being, I don't know, the father, even, who knows, like. So and I know how like it's trying to like read you guys too, because you guys take big swings with everything too, right? And it's
Mhm.
like, well, is he taking a real big swing, and did he already tell us or did he not tell us? So it's like it's a complete mind game. You're warping our minds is kind of what it boils down to. But it's awesome. It's so awesome and so much fun.
Well, I appreciate the compliments, and I'm so glad you're enjoying it. Would it frustrate you if I said I don't think people know what this book is yet?
Oh, just like you did with Radiant Black.
Yeah.
No, wouldn't be surprised. But I will say the whole like if we just like look at it from a design perspective, I love the design of No One. Like I think issue 2, where No One was like up by the camera, and his helmet is literally recording just like a camera, and I was like, oh, that's such a cool concept. And then like later on, you learn that that was kind of like almost foreshadowing that he was like recording everything, and then he like shows it. But it was super super cool. Love the design. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Nightwing too, with his sticks and some stuff. And I know you love Nightwing, so I'm sure, right, that had maybe something to do with it. I may be, speaking out of left field though.
Um. Yeah, I wouldn't say Nightwing was as much an influence on him. He's there's certainly several influences there, but yeah, the sticks and the bow staff thing, that comes out of a like, well, what are we gonna give him? Like, what kind of weapon is he gonna have? That everybody between Daredevil and Nightwing and these Screama sticks, it was like that was less interesting to me. the bow staff was really interesting. And then the idea of like, oh, well, let's do it as a collapsible bow staff that also can split apart. It's like, oh, that's kind of a best of both worlds, because then you can combo it into different things. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of work, but it's been a very fulfilling project.
So I want to backtrack a little bit because Marty kind of low key stole my one question that I had written down for you. I usually free flow a little bit, but years ago, I believe this is like 3, maybe even 4 years ago now. You were on Lawrence Holmes' podcast, The House of L,
Oh yeah,
which is fantastic podcast. I love Lawrence. I don't know him personally, but he seems like an amazing dude.
he's great.
But eventually, it led to a collaboration where he co-wrote the Radiant Yellow focused
Hmm.
issue, Radiant Black #18. And was that part of like that mentorship thing that Marty was talking about, where you guys just kind of like developed this relationship? And you're like, hey, do you want to co-write with this with me? Because I don't have the perspective of a Black American like you do. And like, obviously, this is as someone who lives in the Chicagoland area, Lawrence is a big comic book nerd as well as a big sports guy. So it just seemed like a really good collaboration for the two of you.
Yeah, I really enjoy bringing different voices to comic books, but also just any of the stories that I'm telling. I'm a big believer in trying to put people in positions to succeed. Um, I started as an intern for Richard Donner and Lauren Schuler Donner when I was like 20 years old, and Tom Mankiewicz was my mentor, who wrote the first Superman movie and 4 James Bond movies and a host of other things. His father was Joseph L. Mankiewicz, and his uncle was Herman, who wrote Citizen Kane. Tom and Dick used to say that, in particular, Dick, 95% of directing was casting. Like if you cast the right actors in the right roles, the baseline is going to be so much higher than trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Now it's hard to see that, because you go, well, what makes them the right actor? How do you know? And you know how you figure it out. You cast the wrong people and make that mistake too many times, and then you start to figure out like, I really need to. I need to stop talking myself into something that maybe is too much of a leap. Not to say that some people can't make that leap, but I'm a big believer in trying to find the right people for the particular whatever particular gig. So Lawrence was a great fit for Wendell and Radiant Yellow and what was in my head about the type of story we wanted to tell here. And Lawrence and I have known each other a long time. And during the pandemic, actually wrote an original graphic novel called The Trap with Lance Briggs. And Lance and Lawrence are very close. And Lance and I worked very, very closely for like 2 years on this graphic novel. And I mean like Zooms like multiple times a week, long phone calls multiple times a week, like actually writing together on this thing, and me really trying to teach him the way that I do things, the way that I write books. And it was a great experience. And Lawrence and, like I said, Lawrence and Lance are really close as well. And so we all would talk quite a bit. And um, when it came time to do Radiant Yellow, and I was trying to find the right voice, considering I wanted the character to be a little older, but I wanted him to also be in the Chicagoland area, not necessarily in the city. Um, it was Lawrence who pitched setting him in Gary and Whiting, Indiana, um, and the steel industry and the different eras. Lawrence is a little older than me, and so he has touch points that I don't have, as well as culturally has different touch points than me, and it all just makes that story and that character so much richer as a result. So yeah, another one. I almost broke his brain on that one, because when I pitched the idea, Michael, Lawrence, and I were on a Zoom when I pitched the idea of, well, but what if we do all of these eras at the same time? And I watched Lawrence's eyes just kind of do. We're audio only here, but they just kind of got they just kind of got a little wide. And he's like, okay. I was like, it's all right, man. I was like, don't worry. He's like, I'm going to take care of you here. Like, I'm not like, don't worry. Like, I know how to do this. And we pulled it off. And that's an issue that I am incredibly proud of. And I'm incredibly proud
It's a
of Lawrence.
fantastic issue.
Yeah. Thank you.
A follow-up to that is there room, like obviously you're never going to say never, and I don't want there to be any spoilers, but is there potential for Lawrence to come back and co-write another issue, maybe not necessarily focused on Wendell, because we don't know what's going to happen with him through the Catalyst War?
Yeah, it's always possible. I mean, I would obviously love to work with Lawrence again anyway. I'm not doing anything. How do I want to frame this? You need to see how Catalyst wraps up to even see if the Radiants are still going to be around. Let me put it that way.
Oh, geez.
Whoa.
That's grim.
I mean,
Whoa.
everyone might be dead. Basically, we're not doing any backups or minis or anything like that during Catalyst War, because I want everyone to feel like anything can happen, because, and I truly mean this, anything can happen here. Like, this is a big one. Like, these issues are big.
Yeah, I mean, you're ripping two timelines at the same time now with these two books. I mean, so first of all, issue 18 and what you did with the flow of that, with that one long comic. I mean, I have that thing mounted on my wall. Like, I built a custom frame for it. It's part of my massive verse wall. I'm also the idiot that has that massive verse wall too, that my wife yells at me for all the time.
Oh,
But
that's awesome.
anyways, that comic reminds, like, I just recently read The Longbow Hunters, the DC comic, for another podcast, and like, that does it at smaller scale, because at the last issue has like the side, you can read it two ways. It's got the side panel and then the middle panel. But yours was done so well where you can read it like four different ways,
Right.
or you can just stretch the whole thing out and read it front to back on four different timelines. So that whole flow was amazing and never been done, and it's just incredible. But Wendell feels like such a big key character to the Catalyst War, and I love Wendell. He's kind of one of my personal favorites. So I don't. We'll see what happens to him, but like, I think he's definitely going to come back and be a key part. Just how issue 25 ended.
What have you got? Oh, you haven't seen. Okay, so you haven't seen 26 then. Okay, right. So 25 is out.
26 comes out in a few weeks.
Yeah, because I write for Nerd Initiative, so I'll get it like the Friday before, and then I'll probably be the one writing the review, because I wrote the review for 25, and when I got it the Friday before, and when Ken sent it to me, he goes, Matt, he's like, don't say anything, because it came in two files, and I was like, oh my God, I immediately knew, because like we were talking about the vote, and I was like, he split the timelines. I had a feeling it was going to happen. And it was incredible. Like, I had to bite my tongue for like almost a week. But
here, no one's going to be able to see this, but that's not a bad thing. It'll just be for you guys. So this is, can you see this?
Yeah.
Yep. Oh my God.
So this is 26A and B side by side.
I love the connecting covers. They still look so sick.
So pages 1 and 1.
Oh my God.
Pages 2 and 2.
This is just going to become a reaction channel now.
Pages.
Sorry, guys.
3 and 3.
Cut it out and post.
Yeah.
4 and 4.
Holy shit.
Here, this one's my favorite. 5 and 5.
Yeah, that was that. Oh well, that was a part of the preview pages though that you put on Black Market Narrative.
But you haven't seen those.
No, not this one. Oh no. Oh my God.
Whoa.
Holy crap. This is incredible. Oh yes.
Oh no.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Oh man.
Oh jeez.
So I'm gonna leave it there for you guys, right?
Don't
leave it at that one.
Spoil anything else, but that. Oh my God. Yes.
So cool.
And this
I
is
don't know if I
only,
can edit that out. I think we got to leave those reactions in just to tease
oh my
everything here.
God. Oh my God. Oh my God. I'm so stoked. I can't, like, this is incredible. Whew. All right, Josh, I'm gonna kick the next question over to you. I gotta take a minute.
So, I mean, I guess the question is, after sharing that sort of thing, we were talking about it slightly, but let's just dive into it. So, you left us off on issue 24 with we're going to do a Jason Todd thing. You have to choose who is going to be Radiant Black. You're going to choose who's going forward. And common sense would say we would find out in issue 25. But you pulled a little switcheroo on everyone and went, we're going to go through the Catalyst War with a diverging timeline. And at the end of the Catalyst War, you'll get your answer. So we have to go what we assume is going to be at least a year of this diverging timeline story where we will finally find out what again I'm assuming
No. 6 months, 5 months,
6 months. Okay,
five
so
months. It's issues 25 through 30 is the Catalyst War. It's just
okay,
25 through 30 are there's 2 issues for each one of those.
12. Okay, makes sense. 12 issues total for the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay, 6 months is better than a year, but still. But what made you decide to give yourself so much extra work in this case of writing two diverging storylines on this poll that's going to lead us to who is Radiant Black?
Well, when I used to joke that people don't know what this book is, this is what I was referring to, because this was the plan from pretty much day one. I knew that I knew I was going to build this series as a secret two-hander, and if I did my job right, I would make it very hard for readers to decide who should actually be Radiant Black. And then from there, the idea of, look, this is already a book that plays around with time through Radiant Yellow and the way that he can perceive different branching points of his own kind of life or reality. And so the idea of using using a little quirk of the medium, which is variant covers, as a way to explore an alternate timeline is something that no one's done before. It's also something that felt like um, it felt like a really interesting way to tell this story. And I'm being really careful with what I say here because I don't want to inadvertently spoil something. It's also like this is fundamentally at the core of what the Catalyst War is about. So this series has always been about these two disillusioned millennial friends, best friends, and their strengths and differences. And so, what better way to accentuate those differences than to place them both in a mechanism, i.e., the Catalyst Protocol, that shows and juxtaposes how they would each go about it. But why this is happening, again, is a part of what the event is actually about. So I'm a big believer in committing to the bit. So is Michael. And so when I pitched this idea like over 2 years ago now, 2.5 years ago, maybe longer, it was like, no, you can't do that. And I was like, but couldn't we? And slowly it's like, this is what the book is. This is the event. And, it's tricky because to keep it a secret was very hard. How we solicited it was challenging. I also know that this is a big ask for readers to pick up 2 books a month now out of nowhere. And I understand that not everyone's going to be able to do that. All I can say, though, is that this is a story that I'm incredibly passionate about telling. It's very, very important to me. And this is the way that I've had my heart set on telling it. And I've built it to work in this format. So I totally understand if it's just too much for readers to, invest in, both financially and or emotionally. But just please know, like, this isn't a cash grab. Like, this is fundamental to what I've been building for almost 3 years now.
Yeah, the emotional side of it, like when you put that poll up, when I realized it was a poll, because again, when you had that, you must choose. I was like, okay, robots talking to Marshall and uh Nathan. So like obviously, like whatever. And then scan the QR code, like, oh no, he's gonna kill one of my guys.
So I know early on in, like, I don't remember if it's like issue 2 or 3, we get old man Nathan in cape mode with beard with the beard.
Mhm.
Does that happen during Catalyst War? After Catalyst? Well, maybe not after
Oh,
Catalyst War.
what's funny is I
With that
feel
flashback,
so I feel like people took that a little too literally. That's not it. It's not like a fast like I don't mean to. Normally, I wouldn't like burst anyone's bubble with something like that, but do you remember what he says in that scene?
I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if it was a dream sequence or not, or if
Yeah,
it was like
it's a dream, but it's also as Nathan's trying to write to figure out how to write his novel or how to crack
right.
this novel. This caped version of Radiant Black with a beard, which we did a beard because it feels, I don't know. There's a funny inside joke there that we won't. It's fine. But it's what he says to Nathan is that when Nathan's like, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm what you will never be, worth breathing," and he drops Nathan. Like this is a manifestation of like I am not enough. Like what I'm trying to do here and I'm struggling with, like, why am I doing this? I should give up. Like, I will never become that. Like, anything confident, anything worth breathing. Like, it's not an
Okay.
optimistic, it's not an optimistic bit,
I thought
sure, but it's also not like, this isn't like that part's not like a time travel story. It's just kind of a like, it's a kind of cautionary tale vision.
gotcha. No, that makes total sense now. I didn't know if there was more to it than just what you described, but that's good to have have full disclosure on that because I was thinking about that. I was like, man, if that's what he's going to potentially become and prove that guy wrong, like if we pick the wrong guy, that kind of
I
kills
mean,
that thread.
well, yeah, no, no, no. Look, if Nathan survives, I mean, maybe he'll have a beard one day. I don't know. Like,
You got to put the beard. If he survives, you got to put the beard back in. You got him.
all right, all right. I'll make that promise on this podcast that if Nathan survives, the beard will make an appearance at some point here.
You
Was
heard it
the
here and
votes?
exclusively.
Yeah. Was the vote super close still? Because I know it was like almost 50-50.
It was
Did
close.
it end super close?
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because the Marshall voters are definitely more vocal, but I can tell you, having seen the numbers, uh, well, I can't tell you. I'm just telling you it was very close.
Did you have a preferred winner? I'm sure you've been asked this question 100 times, but was there a winner in your head that like you were like, okay, that one I'm more okay with than the other one, or is it just it's all part of the story that you've had planned?
Um, yeah, I have a complicated relationship with that because the book's not. I've said this plenty of times, but the book's not about me, but there's a lot of me in the book, and so like there are bits of me and Marshall, and there are bits of me and Nathan, and so it was really interesting to see people talk about which character they responded to more and why. Um, but from you have to divorce yourself of that stuff, and that's easy for me to do. It's more from a narrative standpoint and the narrative engine that each character represents is different. And so the vote very much did. I mean, the vote has determined which direction we're going. Um, so it's there certainly was. I thought, well, there. I'm excited to tell the story. I'm excited to tell the story after Catalyst War, uh, with Radiant Black, whoever it will be. We'll just leave it at that. But yeah, there are things that, when you go through a breakup and you realize like it's as much the end of a relationship as it is the death of a future. Like there is some of that, because you do find yourself going and realizing like, oh yeah, well I can't do that anymore. Oh, I can't do that again. Um, and so it is a little bittersweet in that way. But at the same time, something that annoys me a lot about a number of writers, especially on superhero comics, is that I feel like they don't take chances, and they never really risk anything in their stories. And I don't want to be that kind of writer. I've never wanted to be that kind of writer. And if you're doing an Image superhero book, like I feel there is a colossal responsibility there to try to push the envelope and to do things that haven't been done before. And often that requires risk. And it's that line that Prince had about like, or no, it's not Prince, it was David Bowie, like about being in the deep end of the water where, you're in just too deep, where you're on your tippy toes and barely kind of keeping your head above water. That's where the interesting work happens.
That's awesome. I mean, you took a huge swing in issue 4 right off the bat with what you did,
I would
and that
argue,
was like,
I'm going to push back. I would argue issue 3. No one talks about issue 3.
okay,
They talked about issue 3 when they came out. I got crucified over issue 3. And it's like, it's a slow issue to launch a series with. This is like, meandering and writer. And it's like, I wish people would go back and look at that issue, because the way that the story and the genesis, if you want to talk about writing and you actually want to talk about craft, I would urge people to go look at that issue. And that's not coming from, hopefully it's not sounding like it's coming from like a place of ego. The reason it's important to me is because if you're not a writer, trying to understand how challenging that process can actually be and how much you have to respect the process. And the process often is that it sucks until it doesn't. Like you have, it's the closest thing I've ever been able to get to in terms of like really trying to explore and explain and show what it can be like as you're trying to find a story from nothing. And the way that Nathan's story and the bits in that story end up influencing and solving how he's going to adapt his short are something that has happened to all of us kind of time and time again as creators. And that was really important to me, that we do that early. And so like it's anyway, I'm super proud of that issue. And so everyone talks about issue 4, which I'm also super proud of, but you don't care about Nathan in issue 4 and what happens to him
yeah,
if you don't
yeah,
go through his struggles in issue 3.
yeah. I was just gonna say that issue 3 completely builds up the gut punch to issue 4. So absolutely to your point, like issue 3 is pivotal to getting destroyed in issue 4. But I know that like a lot of people talk or not compare it, but like talk about big swings as it relates to Invincible, and they say Kirkman, took his time to 12, and everyone was complaining that was too slow. And then this came out issue 3, 4, boom, boom, and everyone was super stoked. They're like, "Oh my god!"
I mean, you say that, but I know people. I'm telling you, I got blasted about issue 3, about like, what is this book? Nothing is happening in the series. It's so slow. What is this thing? It's so boring. And it's like, it's issue 3. Like what? Like what are we
You got
doing?
to give it,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. You
Sounds
got to
like
let it
people that
breathe a
haven't
bit.
read a lot of Kyle Higgins stuff, in my opinion, because I mean, I'm not saying like everything you do is a slow burn or like there's poignant moments and all these things, but like you have a style and I think it's fantastic. And it, not to like fanboy out right now, But I mean, everything you did building up to issue 4 and beyond, I felt like was part of one full narrative that just built upon each other. And like you said, you don't get that emotional reaction in 4 without 3. And like honestly, in my mental state and everything right now, I couldn't tell you exactly what happened in 3, but if I'm remembering issue 4, I could probably take a good guess, because like you said, it's you're building a relationship with these characters. It's kind of like not necessarily a pilot episode of a TV show, but you have to lay the groundwork and the foundation for these characters at some point, and usually it's early on. So if you're not doing that and you're not connecting with these characters, then what's the point of doing that big twist by 4?
Yeah, I mean it's tricky because when you're working in any sort of genre fiction, there are genre expectations, and this is a superhero action book or a superhero book. One of the expectations being that there's going to be a lot of action, and of course I want there to be, and that was always the intention. But um, I will always, or at least at this kind of stage of my career, I will always choose emotion over action. Um, and I think it's because I know how to do action, and I know that it works better. I mean, this is just like writing 101. Like it works better when you care about the people that you're following. And in comics, sometimes it's hard to do both in an issue. It's not impossible at all.
There's obviously enormous pressure in the comic book world, especially indie comic book. I'm sure there's studios knocking when there's not a strike happening, saying, "Hey, what is it going to cost to do this?" So I'm sure there's studio executives or whoever it is that knocks on doors and says, "Hey, what is it going to cost to do this project?" If you had a preferred medium, because we've already had an animated short film, which was fantastic. Will Friedle as Marshall, Radiant Black, was phenomenal idea, and I do love the Jason Marsden or Josh Keaton brain hive mind fan casting for Nathan. If I put in my 2 cents, I do think Josh Keaton fills what I hear in my head more. But that's just my 2 cents.
Mhm.
But like, if you had a preferred medium between animation or live action, where would you go with Radiant Black, without any studio interference, just you following your heart? Where would you go with it?
I'd want to do something in live action, probably. The tricky thing is that the unfortunately the realities of the film and TV industry is that it would be it's easier to start in live action and then do something in animation than it is to do something in animation and then do live action. And that's not to say that taking a swing at live action first is any sort of guarantee that you could actually get a show going or anything like that. Um, yeah, I mean, we've had we've had some interest um, before the strike. You know, there were some interesting conversations, but I mean, look, I'm not going to sell Radiant Black or option Radiant Black unless we're doing it ourselves, or we're involved. Like I need to be writing that, um, and so unfortunately that changes a lot of the conversation because when something's a free and clear piece of property, sure, it's a lot easier to garner a competitive bidding situation or even just a packaged situation of producers and actors and a director that moves the needle to try to put it into the most attractive package possible to make it kind of undeniable to a studio and then hopefully network to go and make it. But while I recognize and understand and agree that there's certainly components of that that are necessary to getting the type of momentum to actually getting something made, um, you know, I'm not willing to do that at the expense of um, cutting myself out of that process. So the cool thing about doing all of these books at Image is that we all own our own books. And so it's not like a publisher can go behind our back and try to sell Radiant Black without us. It's actually us that the studios and the networks and the producers all have to deal with. So it's got to be the right fit. It's got to be the right partners, and it's got to be the right time. We're not in a rush. Like, I've never made a book to try to go make a movie or something like that. Like, that's just not. If something happens and something comes up, great. I mean, I've written books that my series Hadrian's Wall. It was announced a few years ago
I
that.
was just thinking about that. It's very cinematic.
Mm-hmm. So it was announced a few years ago that we had optioned the book to Gunpowder and Sky, and that they hired me to adapt it, and I was slated to direct it as well. It didn't work out, so we have the rights back on that one. Um, it's a longer road, and that's okay. Like, I want to do it the right way, and it's not to say that everything I write, I have to then, as a comic, I would then have to be involved in for any sort of adaptation. But with Radiant Black, like, yeah, no, it would be like trying to do a Spawn anything without Todd. Like, that's just not going to happen. Todd's not going to let that happen. And I feel similar in that way. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. And like I said, we're not in a hurry or anything. We're trying to make the best books possible and um, build something sustainable for all of us. Like, that's what the Massiverse is. This is all of us trying to work together to build something in a way that really hasn't been done before. And we'll see where we land.
That's awesome. How many issues? And this is my last question.
Sure.
I know early on,
Now, Marty,
you
you've
mentioned
got to
about
have more. Come on, I do these so rarely.
how many issues are you up to now, either pre-writing or in your head? I know early in interviews, right? You were like, "Oh, I'm up to like issue 30." So how far down the rabbit hole are you beyond Catalyst War at this point? Like, that we could potentially expect, that we know of, like 50, 55, 60. How far
um,
ahead are you?
I know through 50. Yeah,
Solid.
I know, and I don't know like issue by issue, but like I know arcs. Like, I know kind of I know big moves through 50. Yeah, yeah. Maybe is it 50? Yeah, I'd say 50. Yeah,
That's just exciting.
or maybe longer. I mean, I have ideas for beyond that for sure. Um, but yeah, it's cool. It's a really fun sandbox to continue to play in.
One thing I know a lot of creators did, especially back in our heyday when Lost was dominating the airwaves, one of the things that the creators were talking about was they knew the last shot of the show. They knew what the last shot was going to be, which is always going to be Jack's eyes closing. Do you have in your head already like what would you want to be the last panel? Like, I'm not asking for spoilers, but like, do you already have that like last panel, that last page in mind?
Um, I have I have an ending. I have an idea for a scene in a potential ending that is not anything that I would get to for, you know, I don't have plans to get to it for a long time or anything like that. But I might not even do it. Like, cause that's the thing is like, I think in, I think in character arcs in that way. And, um, sometimes stories go where you think they're going to go, and other times you come up with better ideas along the way. And that's why I say, like, I know what the moves are through 50, but like, it could change based on a variety of factors. And I have to be careful in what I say here because I keep forgetting that issue 26 hasn't even come out yet, much less um, what the next few issues are going to be. Um, so yeah, it's there is one in I have one in mind that could be powerful, but it also is something that there's like 3 moves, big moves that would have to happen first before it would even be possible or feasible. And so now I'm like way ahead of talking. You know what I mean? Like I'm talking now about like hypothetical directions for characters that we haven't actually necessarily even committed to yet. But when Catalyst War is done, I think a lot of that'll make more sense.
Mhm. No, I'm just always curious, like how far into the storytelling idea it becomes for creators, especially one that I respect as much as you. It's just such an interesting concept when or creators have that end goal in mind and what they're doing to build towards it. Because as you said, it's a fluid situation, especially in comics where circumstances change, budgets change, so you might have to adapt as they may be. So it's just something that's always in my head. And how many opportunities am I going to have to ask you the question? So
Oh, sure.
figured
No,
I'd
appreciate it.
ask.
No worries.
So I lied. I have just two more
Go.
because
I'm shocked.
Kyle's giving me. Come on,
Are
Josh.
you on the Discord right
So
now sourcing questions?
no, but I could if you wanted me to real quickly. I'm away from all social media because I want to have 100% attention on this. So will we have an idea? And Owen always drops this meme because I think he put it on the Discord with you have no idea what this comic is. Will we have an idea what this comic is after Catalyst War, or is that still to be determined?
I think well, what I meant by that when I first said it was where we're at right now. The book has always been designed and intended to be this two-hander that was going to put the readers in the shoes of the characters having to make this incredibly challenging decision. But even after that decision, how we arrive at the ultimate kind of answer was going to be through this dual timeline Catalyst War event. That's what the book is. That's what the book isn't intended to be. But beyond that, it, it's really tough. It's tough to. It's
Tough to
it's
answer.
tough to answer without, tipping my hand on our hand on the Catalyst War too much. No, I think you know what the book is now. Like until I change my mind or until we completely subvert that or upend that after Catalyst War. But no, it's the story of these two best friends. Like that's really what the book is about.
And I guess the will we see no one somewhere crossing, or no, yeah, exactly, who crossing over somewhere within the massive verse besides this 10 issue mini, or well, large issue run that we have going on.
That would be cool, wouldn't it?
Marty, you pulled a
He's such a
John.
Yeah, I know. He's such a cool character.
He is. He is.
I will say I hope to see him beyond, or her, whoever's behind the mask, um, beyond the 10 issues, because I think there's a lot of cool things that he could potentially help, or she potentially could help with.
There are some things with no one. Yes, there are some. There's some future plans with no one. Yeah.
That's exciting. All right, Josh. I promise I'm done, but I could come up with more.
Well, yeah, I'm sure I could get there too, but we're about 100 minutes past my bedtime. So, and I know Kyle's very busy, so we will. I think we'll call it a night there. And I know it's way past your bedtime too, Marty. You're an hour ahead of me. But
Yeah,
Kyle,
it's almost
again,
11.
thanks so much. And I just really quickly, Marty got to share his story about how he found you. I literally found you. I was at Wizard World in 2013
Mm-hmm.
in Chicago. And I had been out of comics for a long while, and I found a Nightwing comic. It's like, oh, I've always wanted to get into a Nightwing comic. So I picked up Nightwing New 52 #1. I think it was a second print because it was an all red cover.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of flipping through it. And I literally walked past you. You had a table with your name on it, and I was like, Kyle Higgins, why does that look familiar? And I look at the front and it's just like, oh my God. So I walked back, and you were just extraordinarily kind with your time, and you had a nice little chat with me. And even my wife was just like, oh my God, he's so cool. So
Oh,
you got two fans for life just from that one little interaction in August 2013. I don't know if you remember it or if you even still have it, but my wife made a little Nightwing acrylic painting canvas for you that we gave to you in, I
yeah.
think, 2019.
I do have that. It's in my parents' house in Chicago, I believe. Wow, that's awesome. That's a very small world. I do remember that show in August. That was a it was a challenging day at the show for me for just some personal reasons. There was some stuff going on, um, but I remember. Yeah, I remember that show really well. Like, that's awesome. I didn't know that. I appreciate
Yeah,
you
that
telling me
was a
that.
really good day for both me and my wife because she started collecting the original 2000s Harley Quinn comic that day. And again, I got to meet a writer that I was like, oh my gosh, this dude's super cool. And then later find out that like, oh, we're the same age and literally from around the same area because I grew up in Elgin.
Oh
So
yeah,
like,
where'd you go to
it's
school?
just
High school?
I went to Highland and then Kimball, I think,
Oh,
was the middle school before I moved out.
yeah.
And then I moved into the Rockford area.
Wow, that's awesome,
But
man.
I've
Very
always
small
been
world.
around. And then, yeah, seeing the Belvedere Oasis was still one of the coolest things in comics for me. It's like, oh, I went there all the time for Krispy Kremes.
Well, the bummer is that I mean, my Oasis was the O'Hare Oasis that was torn down a few years ago, and so when it came time to do an Oasis gag, it was like, It's not there. Where am I gonna? What Oasis am I gonna use?" So I picked the Belvedere one. Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, well, the people of Belvedere are thankful that we
there's
don't
this,
only have
there's a
tornadoes to be thankful for
there's a
now.
statue. There's a Radiant Black statue somewhere, and I have a
I'll petition for it.
so I have a gag. I don't know if I should say this on air because in case I do it, but I had an idea about like Lockport building Radiant Black a statue, but they like put it under a bridge or something, and so it's just like but you know, an Oasis, like that's prime real estate.
There you go. Yeah. All right. Well, Kyle, again, thanks so much for the stories you tell. The director that tells stories, as you put it. Do you mind sharing your social media handles before we get out of here?
Sure, yeah. I'm on uh Twitter and Instagram, Kyle D Higgins. I don't really post all that much. The better way to probably follow me, so we have a newsletter for Black Market Narrative that I write. It's supposed to be once a week, usually isn't. Trying to get better about that, but there's a lot of stuff going on right now. Um, it's if you just go to blackmarket.la, you can, that's our site for Black Market Narrative, but there's also a link for the newsletter there. You can sign up. We have a cool YouTube channel that we post stuff on. We just started posting the No One episodes on YouTube as well. So there are versions of those that are up there. And then at the moment, we're in the midst of the Infernal Girl Red Book 2 Kickstarter, which will be wrapping up in 7 days here. We're still trying to meet our goal. So I'd urge everyone to go take a look at that if they can. Trying to think if there's anything else. Pick up the Massiverse. Radiant Black, Rogue Sun, The Dead Lucky, Infernal Girl Red, No One, Radiant Red, Radiant Pink is miniseries, and yeah, I'm just I'm you know, very very appreciative to everyone who has tried our little superhero universe and is still reading our little superhero universe and really allowing us to kind of take these crazy swings that we so enjoy taking.
To follow up with the Infernal Go Red, this episode will be dropping after the Kickstarter campaign has concluded. We are, I say we as if I'm included. I am backing it, but that doesn't mean I'm doing anything actually like creatively for it. But is there a contingency plan if the goal is not met?
We'll see what happens. Yeah, we'll
Okay,
see what
well,
happens.
I mean, we'll keep putting out calls to action. I know I've shared it on some Facebook groups, but hopefully we don't have to worry about any contingency plans and everything goes smoothly in these last few days.
Yeah, yeah, and then
Marty, oh,
be on the lookout for news coming out of New York Comic Con next month in October, and we're gonna have a fun 2024.
yeah, we'll definitely be covering at least the Massiveverse announcements from Comic Con on the podcast. So if you don't catch them through Twitter or live, we will be recapping them for you. Marty, do you mind sharing your socials where people can find you?
Sure. I am at Marty Stoked on all social media platforms. Um, I don't even know how many there are. I lost track. I don't post to them all. I'm mostly on Twitter, if that, and a little bit on Instagram. And then I'll plug the Radiant Black Discord, which I know all the creatives are in there interacting when they can, which is a great time just to theorize about the comic and meeting like-minded individuals, and it's just a really good time. So I'll make sure, Josh, you have the invite link in the show notes so you can add that for new folks that are in there. There's a ton of people in there. I think there's like 400 or 500 people now, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and it's a
So
great
yeah,
community. It's fantastic. It's a little it's a little intimidating to go in there and just see how many people are talking about all these things, but it's also awesome because you get different perspectives, you get people that catch things you haven't seen before. But again, we're trying to get Kyle out of here so he can do stuff. But thanks again, everyone, for listening. You can email us at tsmackpod@gmail.com if you have any questions, comments, concerns. And most importantly, thanks again for listening and take care. And thank you, Kyle, for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.